Hello there. I think that is us live. So, hello Fit&Well. We at Fit&Well have very kindly invited me to take over their Instagram account this evening and chat to you about anxiety. So, nice to see people joining. Hello there. My name is Dr Rachel Allan. I'm a psychologist and author. I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland. And yeah, I work as a psychologist, seeing people with all kinds of difficulties, but usually one thing that makes up part of everyone's difficulties is anxiety. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My Instagram is at Rachel Allan Consultancy. Give me a follow on there. I share lots of stuff to do with psychology, tips, perspectives, stuff that hopefully can be quite helpful. You might get something useful from it. So do give me a follow if that is of interest. We are Fit&Well, as you know, posts lots of brilliant health-related content, and if you don't already, check out the website, which is fitandwell.com. Tonight, I really want to make this as useful as I can for you guys who've joined and who are following. It's lovely to see so many of you join in. So give me your questions. If you have questions about anxiety or how you're going to cope, particularly with joining the world again, as it were, as we're coming out of lockdown, we're thinking about getting back to normal life, so-called normal life. That's bringing up anxiety, I think, for all of us, to be honest. Give me your questions, give me your concerns. What do you want to know from me about how you can manage that? And hopefully I might be able to give you something that's going to be helpful. So, I have a book called How to Help Someone with Anxiety. This is a practical guide for anybody who has someone close to them who's struggling with anxiety and who they want to help. So, you know, we often encourage people around us if we think they're struggling. Talk to someone, speak to me, ask for help. But what do you do if you find yourself in that position where you're the person being confided in, or you're the person who's in the scenario or in the position where you're being asked to help? How to Help Someone with Anxiety walks you through a really user-friendly, practical framework of how you can do that effectively. It draws on my experience as a psychologist. It also draws on my experience as someone who has had many struggles with anxiety myself over the course of my life. So hopefully it helps anyone in the helper role, but also full of tips for anyone who wants to better manage anxiety themselves. It's lovely to see so many people joining. Hello, nice to see you. Nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Rachel Allan. I'm a psychologist and I'm here tonight to talk about anxiety. So, give me your questions, give me your concerns. Hopefully we can keep this as interactive as possible because I want to make it useful, really useful for you. So, I'll take a couple of the questions that are coming in. First of all, does the book work with kids? The book, to be really honest, is written more with adults in mind. I'll tell you why that is. I work predominantly with adults in my own clinical work, and a lot of the contact that I get in my private practice tends to be from adults who are worried about other adults and their life. So I wrote it from the perspective of wanting to empower that particular group. However, having said that, everything in the book is completely applicable to helping children and young people. So while I would say that's not the specific focus, and it's certainly not sort of specifically written for that group of people, you'll find loads in there that might help you if you're in that role of supporting children and young people. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why we get anxious. Because often Like right now, everybody's talking about anxiety. I'm hearing so many people saying, and I'm feeling it myself and hearing it from the people around me in my own life, this is daunting. Going back into sort of normal scenarios where we were completely at ease before is really, really daunting. So maybe you're joining tonight because you're someone who has lived with anxiety a really long time, maybe all your life, and you have noticed that now that we have restrictions lifted and we're going back to normal life, that your anxiety has escalated. Maybe you're someone who has never really particularly struggled with anxiety, never really identified before with having anxiety, and suddenly, with the way things are changing and the way things are changing so quickly, you're starting to notice that this is a concern for you and this is something you're struggling with. So wherever you're coming from, let's think about the source of that anxiety. Why do we get anxious? Because sometimes just having a bit of an understanding of what's actually going on and what's making up that experience can in itself be one of the most helpful things for getting a bit of a handle on it. So, anxiety, if you think about when you get anxious yourself, that sort of feeling that you get, if you're walking down the street, if you're out or whatever, and you're about to step off the pavement to cross the road, and you notice a lorry coming at speed from your side, what are you going to do? You're not going to sort of stand there and go, well, that looks quite dangerous, I'll maybe sort of step back onto the pavement. That's not how it works. Automatically, you're going to go back onto the pavement in a split second. So what is that? That, as we know, as you all know, is the fight or flight response. But the fight or flight response is triggered by a very specific sensory function in our brain. Sorry for the noise, my cat is here, she might join us. Fight or flight response. I often describe this to my clients as being a bit like a fire alarm. The fight or flight response is like the body's equivalent of a fire alarm. And just before that fight or flight response is activated, we have a mechanism which is like a smoke detector. It has one job, and its job is to send out that message, that signal, danger, if it detects a threat in the environment beyond a certain threshold. So just like your smoke detector, it's not your smoke detector's job in your house, it's not your smoke detector's job to assess whether the source of the smoke is because you've burnt a piece of toast or whether the source of the smoke is because there's an engulfing fire. That's not its job. Its job is simply to detect any threat above a certain threshold and to go off. So if you equate that to our physical system doesn't go, oh, well, maybe that's a real threat, or maybe that's actually feels like a threat, but it's okay. It doesn't do that. Any level of threat that's detected, it goes off, and that fight or flight response is activated. We all know that familiar feeling, the heart pumping, the shortness of breath, the getting warm, all of that. We all know what that feels like. That sort of almost the panic feeling, you can't catch your breath, you're feeling nervous. So, what do we do with that then? If when that signal is going off in the body, how is that something that we can get control over? We're going to come back to that. Let's come back to thinking about life post-pandemic, loosely speaking. Of course, we're still in the pandemic, but post-lockdown, certainly, we're all moving out of lockdown, things are opening up, there's talk of going back to work. Let's say you are someone who pre-lockdown was working in a busy, maybe a city centre, a town centre, maybe you were up bright and early in the morning, maybe you were going to the gym or walking your dog or taking your kids to nursery before taking a bus or a train into the city centre, picking up a coffee, not thinking anything of it, going into your office, sharing an open office space with 50, 100 other people, lots of conversations, lots of face-to-face meetings, working to deadline. And then in March 2020, all that changed and you've been working from home. Let's think about what happens to your level of tolerance in that. Because of course that requires a level of tolerance. When we do anything repeatedly, we build up a tolerance to it. So those interactions, those everyday sort of practices that we do, when we do them every day, they become automatic. We really don't think anything of them. But then when that stops, what happens to our threat detector is that it becomes more sensitive because it's not exposed to the same amount of stimulus repeatedly over time. So what it takes to trigger that threat response becomes lower. So now we might find ourselves in a situation where we're thinking, gosh, what's wrong with me? I used to do this without any problem. It never used to bother me. And now the thought of going on a train or the thought of going back to the gym or sitting in a room with my colleagues, the thought of going to a party feels completely overwhelming. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, and it doesn't mean your anxiety is out of control. All it means is that that inner smoke detector has become more sensitive, and that your tolerance level for that level of stimulation has dropped because you've not been exposed to it. That's just how we work. And it's so natural, completely natural, to have an apprehension and maybe even a real fear and a dread of going back to these day-to-day things that we used to take in our stride. And that's the first thing I really want to convey here tonight, is that that is a normal response. That is a normal response. Doesn't mean there's not things we can do about it. We can, and we're going to talk about those. But if you are feeling that heightened anxiety, that really is a normal response. So I hope if you're worried about that, that you feel reassured. I've got a visitor here. This is my cat, Trudy. Hi, Trudy. Do you like cats? She's an amazing cat. Thank you, Trudy. Does anyone else speak to their pet in a special voice? Is that just me? Okay. So, I'm just picking up a comment here. Thank you so much for this comment. Having never experienced anxiety before, I found it really hard not to take on too much work. I feel at the panic of not having work, but that is counteracted by feeling overwhelmed. Yeah. Any advice? Another question. Why is anxiety challenging in the middle of the night, for example, at 4 a.m? Okay. Thank you so much for your questions. I want to come back to that one about work, because gosh, what a natural response. You know, I think anyone who is in that situation where you perhaps work for yourself or perhaps rely on a certain amount of work, you know, coming in, and of course the absolute uncertainty that many of us, most of us even faced back at the beginning of the pandemic, and then that's obviously continued to unfold throughout things, that has placed us in a state of anxiety. Of course it has, because what makes us anxious above anything else is, of course, uncertainty. We love certainty. We love to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, and we like to feel assured. What we really, really struggle with, understandably, is uncertainty and unpredictability. Why? Because we need a level of predictability to feel safe and to feel that we're in control of our environments. We need to feel in control to feel safe. And if that level of certainty is removed from us, we lose that sense of control. So what are we going to do? Of course, we're going to seek to regain that control. Static Creative asks, you know, how you then get to the point where you feel overwhelmed. Yes, for sure. That's such a good example of what we do when anxiety, or rather how anxiety and our efforts to control anxiety can end up almost making anxiety worse. Because we feel a loss of control. We're going, okay, how can I grasp control? Well, I'm going to take on more work. Of course I am. I'm going to grab every piece of work, things that I might have turned down before. I'll do anything, you know, to manufacture that sense of certainty. In the short term, that kind of works. But of course, in the long term, that can make us feel really overwhelmed. And the first step out of that cycle is to notice you're in that cycle. And a really good question always in that scenario is to ask yourself, okay, is what I'm about to do, is this behaviour helping or worsening my anxiety in the long run? And if you realise, oh, actually, now that I've reflected on it, it's maybe not that helpful, you could just take that step back and reevaluate before you go any further and end up feeling even more overwhelmed. So I want to move on a bit because I want to keep it fairly brief tonight as we don't have overly long. So I want to share with you a little bit of practical stuff. So if we're saying, okay, I struggle in that way, what should I do? Well, let's go back to that scenario of you're someone who, lots of stimulation, lots of stuff going on pre-lockdown, that drew to a halt, and now you're saying, how can I possibly, acclimatise to that again? I can't go to a party. I can't get the train. I can't imagine coping with all of that. That's far too much. Yeah, because we are all completely out of practice. So when we're out of practice, the best way to rebuild that gradually so that we're almost relearning that really basic stuff that we've done before. So as with any goal, if we can break it down into manageable chunks, what we do is we set ourselves up to succeed. So that can feel a little bit frustrating. That can feel like, I can't believe I'm having to take it slowly, or why can't I just do it? But we've got to be careful with the attitude we take to ourselves around that. If we're too hard on ourselves and if we sort of treat ourselves without any level of understanding and say, come on, what's the matter with you? You should be doing all this. Let's just go for it. That might work, but it might actually set you up to feel even more anxious. The way we would manage that in psychological therapy, when you've got a big goal that feels quite far away, it's a little bit like you're standing at the bottom of a staircase and you're looking all the way up. You're thinking, oh my goodness me, I can never get up to the top. I can nowhere near fit enough to get to the top of those stairs. Okay, take the first step. And then you get a little bit more confidence and you feel a bit better about yourself. So you can take the next step and you get a bit more confident. So you can take the next step. And so you get a bit more confident. And as that process unfolds with manageable steps or increments, one on top of the next, like climbing that big staircase, one day you look back down and you think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've come all that way. That's exactly how we do it. That's exactly how we do it in psychological therapy. There's no great revelation there. But sometimes I think we all need that reminder. Take it slowly and take those steps bit by bit. I've got a few more people joining in. Lovely to see you all. So if you are just joining, hello Rebecca, hello Siobhan, lovely to see you. I'm Dr Rachel Allan. I'm a psychologist and I am here kindly invited by We Are Fit&Well to talk about anxiety. I'm coming to you from my home in Glasgow, and I'm sharing some of the simple stuff that I actually think most of us know, really. We just sometimes maybe need to be reminded of it or need to reconnect with it in order to help ourselves feel a little bit more in control. So, takeaways so far, just to summarise. 1, anxiety has a purpose. That purpose is to keep us safe. But sometimes, because of the way our bodies are wired and the way we're set up, anxiety catches us out. And although our body and our system is well-meaning and it's seeking to keep us safe, sometimes it creates an experience that makes life difficult for us. Once we understand that, and once we can notice what our body actually does when that fire alarm is going off, we can then hopefully realise that what's happening is normal, particularly in the situation we're in. We're not talking about any sort of disordered thinking here. We're not talking about a disordered response. What we're talking about is a completely understandable response to being out of practice at something. And whether you're coming to this from the context of experiencing anxiety, long term, or whether it's new to you, there are things that you can do to help yourself gradually overcome that anxiety. Some of it might be things that you've done before in the past that work well for you, but it might be that you need to adapt slightly or take a slightly new approach depending on where you're coming from. And that's one of the things that I really want to share with you tonight. So, okay, anxiety is normal as we go back into normal life. We can manage that first and foremost by easing back in, having an attitude of kindness and patience with ourselves, just like you would with someone who is learning something or relearning something, learning something new for the first time or relearning something. What do we require when we're learning? We require patience, we require a bit of understanding, and most of all, we require practice, exposure to the thing we're learning, repetition, and a supportive attitude. And if we can provide that for ourselves, then this process and the anxiety that this process brings is going to become more manageable. So, having said all that, I want to share with you personally and professionally the two main hacks that I recommend to everyone else and that I use in my own life when dealing with an anxious situation in the moment. So let's say you're saying, okay, Rachel, that's quite good advice. I can do that. I can take a graded approach and I can say, well, I'm going to set myself this sort of minor task within the broader scheme of what I want to do. But even then, my heart starts to beat faster, or I get that sort of blind panic feeling. What do I do then? How do I overcome that in the moment? If you think back to our smoke detector analogy, I'm going to give you the psychological equivalent of realising it's just a piece of toast and that it's safe, and waving the dish towel in front of the smoke detector to stop it going off. I don't think you're supposed to do that, but that is what we do in order to keep ourselves a little bit calmer in real life. We need to give our brain the message that says, okay, thank you brain, I realise you're trying to protect me, but actually there isn't a threat here, I'm just out of practice, so you can switch off your well-intended response. Thank you very much. How do we do that? It's through breathing. It really is through breathing. I've been a psychologist for over 10 years. I've been a therapist for 15 years. It's the best we've got, I promise you. And if we use it correctly, it really can help us reset and tell that well-meaning internal response, it's okay, I'm safe. The simplest breathing technique that I use is breathe in through your nose for 5. I'm going to practice this in a second. But when you're doing this, be careful. So if when you're doing this, you sort of notice your shoulders going, you're doing it wrong. Because you're breathing all up here. And that's not going to send the oxygen to where we need it in the body. We need the oxygen to travel right into the body in order for the brain to get the message that we're safe. So when you're doing that breathing, we're going to practice it together in a second. I want you to picture sending it as far down your body as you can. Picture it going into your feet if you can. And what should happen is that it fills your lungs completely, and that should cause your tummy to sort of go out a wee bit. So we're going to go in for 5, down to your feet, and hopefully your tummy will go out. And we don't want this. Hold for 5, I'll count you. And then you're going to go out for 5, as if you're sort of blowing out a candle, like this. We're going to do that for the purposes of practicing, but if you're doing this in a scenario where you might feel a bit self-conscious breathing out like that, you can just as easily do it discreetly like this. Okay? So, here we go. We're going to wave the dish towel in front of the smoke detector and tell the body, listen, thanks, don't worry, we're safe. You can relax. The alarm can stop. So, a big to start. Ready? And then we're going to go in through the nose. 1, 2, 3 to the feet. 4, filling the lungs. 5, hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4. All the air out. 5. In again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5. And 2, 3, 4, 5. If you do that 5 to 10 times, what you'll find is that you're sending a message to your brain that you're safe. So all the physiological bits of anxiety start to subside. When we're physically anxious, the bit of our brain that does the rational thinking, this bit, the bit that can say, it's all right, you're safe, you're okay, kind of goes offline. When we can give the brain the message, we're safe, it's okay, you can relax, the body can come out of the state of threat, out of the state of alarm, and this part of the brain that helps us think straight can come back online. So then that can make it easier for us to rationalise and to say, right, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now, and at the same time I know that I'm safe. I want to show you how to supercharge that. So how to wave the dish towel more assertively if you really need that alarm to stop going off right away. Right hand on your left shoulder, left hand on your right shoulder. So you're sitting like this in what we call a butterfly position, okay? It doesn't really matter if your hands are crossed like that, or if you prefer you can tap your sides or whatever. The important thing here is that we're stimulating the body left and right in succession. Because what that does is it stimulates left and right side of the brain. And when we do that, that supercharges the message that we're giving the brain. So when we're doing that breathing, in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5, and repeating that, we're giving the message, it's okay, it's safe, we can switch that threat system off temporarily because we're safe. And then if we add in the tapping left and right as we do that, that just supercharges that message, makes it more effective. So we're going to do the breathing again, but this time just mirror me with the tapping and notice what happens. Okay, so a big to start, and then in, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, 5. Do that again. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you can carry on with that for as long as you want until you notice your body's starting to come into that state of more calm. Welcome to those joining us. Listen, it's nice to have you with us. You're joining the Fit&Well.com session on anxiety with me, Dr Rachel Allan. If you've come in the middle of that exercise, you're probably wondering what we're doing. We are practicing some breathing exercises with a little bit of what we call bilateral stimulation to really practice giving our brains the message that yes, I might feel anxious, but thank you, you can switch off the threat activation because actually we're okay. And I hope that might be a useful hack for you. So when you're on the bus, remember you don't have to sit like this. Tap left and right sides or left and right feet or whatever. It really doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is that left and right is activated while you're breathing. And that is the equivalent of when fire alarm's going off in the body. That is you waving the dish towel and saying, look, thanks, I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I've assessed the situation. We don't need to be anxious right now. So you can no longer sound. Thanks, Maddie, for that. As you're saying, such a good trick, easy to do anytime you need to. Listen, this is my first ever live. I was quite nervous coming on here tonight. Someone kindly reminded me to do a little bit of breathing and a little bit of tapping. Sure enough, that's what I do. I do that all the time. I do it when I'm nervous. I do it when I'm anxious. Someone asked earlier about anxiety when you wake up in the middle of the night, try that when you wake up in the middle of the night, because what your mind does in the middle of the night is give you all kinds of big stories of dread, of doom, of what could go wrong, all that really negative stuff. And if you can do your breathing and your tapping at the same time, hopefully that might just be enough to bring the body back to a state of calm and help you get back off to sleep. So, main takeaways for tonight. 1, anxiety has a function of keeping us safe, but sometimes it sort of creates an effect where it locks us in or makes life a bit more difficult for us. It's a well-meaning thing, but sometimes it can make life more difficult. It doesn't make us abnormal, it doesn't mean that we're broken, and it certainly doesn't mean that we can't get control over it. It is normal and natural to feel anxious about going back into normal life. Easy does it. One step at a time. You do a bit, you get a bit more confident, build that tolerance, you do a wee bit more, and you keep going like that. And you use your breathing exercises to tell the brain, it's okay, I'm safe, we can handle this. We can keep going. Listen, they asked me to speak for half an hour. I'm not going to keep you. I'm sure you've got an evening to get to. So, my Instagram is at Rachel Allan Consultancy. Give me a follow. If you're interested in my services, you can check those out at www.rachelallanconsultancy.com. My book, How to Help Someone with Anxiety, the publisher is Welbeck Balance. That is available to pre-order now, and it's actually out next week. So if you do want to order that, you won't have to wait too long for your copy. Massive thanks to Fit&Well for inviting me. Thank you to you all for your lovely comments. I'm so delighted that so many people joined. It's just been lovely to see you. You never know, it might encourage me to do some more Instagram lives myself, so watch this space. Listen, you know where to find me. Thank you again. Take care. Good night.